Thank you, Ray. Douwe and I are very excited to be here today. During the next 15 minutes or so, we'd like to share with you the most important elements you need to know to tell a great research story. So as you know, everyone is talking about storytelling. We see articles in Adweek and other marketing publications, talks about storytelling at the TED conference, and even consultants offering storytelling training. The problem is that these articles are usually about telling the brand story to consumers or how to leverage digital marketing to tell your story. Storytelling's role in the market industry and how to act upon it is not very clear. So how does storytelling fit into market research? At the end of the day, it's the essence of what we deliver to our clients and to our stakeholders, whether they be marketing, sales, R&D, agencies, or the like. It defines our job. That's why I really do love this quote from Google that you see here, because it tells us exactly what storytelling means to the market researcher. And let me read that right now. It is your job to unwrap the data and the insights and present them as logically and with the simplest flow possible. So how do you do it? That's why we're really all here today to find out. There are 3 steps you should always remember. Start with the business issues, uncover the insights, and develop an inspiring story flow. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Douwe now, who will talk about step 1, start with the business issues.
All right, so, all too often, we start jumping in, looking for cool insights, and jumping into our story without stepping back and kind of really understanding what the client's business issues are. And, we don't know the business issues. It's going to be really hard to tell the story that our clients are interested in. Because as researchers, as nerdy researchers, we love the insights, we love the data. But most of our stakeholders are not really the researchers. They need us to transform the data into a story that they recognize, they remember, that inspire them to take action. So these business issues should really lead the narrative of our story, right? We shouldn't be talking about the highest scoring idea. Instead, we should be talking about how to launch an innovation in a new market. We shouldn't be talking about brand equity scores. We really should be talking about how to make your brand stronger, how to grow your brand. And instead of talking about the shopper demographics, how to grow your sales and how to allocate your shopper marketing budget. So how do you do this? How do you identify the business issue? So you really want to start talking to stakeholders. And when we talk about stakeholders, these are the people that are actually going to use the outcomes of your research, right? We talk about marketeers, CEOs, the shopper marketeers, salespeople, not necessarily the researchers, because they will be able to tell you what decisions are they going to make based on the insights of the study. Or they can help you say, what are the specific actions that they will take based on the research. Or they can tell you what the underlying questions are that they have. Or even better, what are the working hypotheses that they have. It's really important to understand that before you dive into the insights. Now, Allyson, back to you to talk a little bit on how to uncover these insights.
Thanks, Douwe. Let me first start by saying that storytelling is an art and a science, especially for market researchers. We start with the science, the data analysis, and if we do it right, end with a well-told, compelling story for our stakeholders. So getting from the data to the story requires a methodical approach. You don't have to be a very creative person to get to a great research story. What you do need is a roadmap for how to get there, a plan in place of how you're going to approach it. That's what we have here on this slide, a roadmap for developing a story around market research data. So let's imagine that the data has just arrived in your email box. What do you do? First, find out what does the data say. These are the facts, plain and simple. Nobody can question them. This is the scientific piece. Next, what does the data mean? These are the insights, the business insights, if you will. This is what the data means in the context of the business issues that Douwe just spoke about. And this is really a mix of art and science. And then finally, how can you best express your insights in words? This is the story, and this is really the art portion of it. Okay, so let's go over an example of how this would really work in your day-to-day lives. So imagine a CPG company wants to launch a new dishwashing detergent that will be positioned as having tough ingredients straight from nature. The client needs to decide which concept warrants investment and find ways to optimize it. So in this case, a concept test was implemented to address the issue. So we start off with, what does the data say, the facts? So for example, the data might say, concept A, which the concept is called Earth's Answer, has a top box relevance score of 40%. What does the data mean, the insights? Okay, this is the mix of the art and science. Earth's Answer meets consumer needs, surpassing relevance benchmarks for the category. So that's a bit of a mouthful. How can you best express your insights in words? Just simply and logically put, Earth's Answer does a great job meeting consumers' needs. So you would go on with this roadmap for each of, let's say, the survey questions that you have or the pieces of information that you have. Now I just want to go over some quick tips for getting to the research stories. Do write down your insights first. Don't jump right into PowerPoint and how you're going to design each chart. You should know your story first. Do use natural language, and don't talk about metrics. Metrics support the story, but they're not your story, as Douwe covered. And do focus only on insights. This is important. Don't mix in recommendations. Sometimes people fall into the trap for every new learning they have, they want to make a recommendation really quick. It's better to tell the complete story in its entirety and then step back and look and think before making recommendations. So now let's go to the third step, develop an inspiring story flow. Okay. Once you know what your data says, transform the data into insights and express them in concise and natural language. Step back and take a look at what you have. What's your macro story? What are the substrands? And importantly, what can you chop out of the story? Here's another quote that provides great guidance when developing a market research story. Good analysts are great assassins. They are great at finding lame metrics and assassinating them, which means that you don't have to include all of the survey questions and information you have in your story. Only include what's relevant to the story, which in essence is relevant to your stakeholders' business issues. So let's go back to our example of Earth's Answer concept test. Here on the left side of the screen is the first insight we gleaned. Earth's Answer does a great job meeting consumers' needs. And then underneath, we've laid out some additional insights that the researcher uncovered. It will struggle to be seen as differentiated, despite being the first major brand to enter the natural ingredient space. It is priced right. It will face believability issues regarding the benefits of natural ingredients. And it meets needs that are currently important to consumers, those needs relating to efficacy. So the first thing we need to do is to step back and think, do we really need to include all these insights in the story? We probably don't need to talk about price, as it really wasn't a business issue for the client and doesn't really fit in with the other insights. So we would scratch that. Now that feels a little bit better. But the insights we have here are out of sequence, and they're not weaved together in a way that makes sense and therefore can be remembered by anybody. So on the right, what we've done is put them into a logical story flow. As you see, the order has changed, and also we've added linkage words like because and however. So now we have Earth's answer does a great job meeting consumer needs. This is because it meets needs that are currently important to them, which is efficacy. However, it will struggle to be seen as differentiated, and on top of that, it will face the believability issues. Now that is really this story that can be remembered and retold and relived within the organization. So now I'm going to go back to Douwe, who can give us some tips on common research narratives, as well as how to bring your story to life.
Thanks, Allyson. You know, a good story has a structure that kind of people unconsciously recognize, right? And that, can you go to the next page? And that sort of helps you sort of to follow your argument, and it helps people to remember the key takeaways. And there are different types of these sort of structures that people sort of recognize unconsciously. And here there's 3 of them, but there are a few more of them if you really put your head to it, right? One of them we could call the quest, right, where you take your reader sort of through a journey to discover opportunities, and it can use to conquer competitors and drive growth. Really take your reader by the hands and take them on a journey. Another idea, another structure that you sometimes use for innovation research is the audition. You evaluate different stimuli, and you treat each evaluation as an audition. You point out the strengths, the weaknesses, and ways to improve. And the third idea is sort of connecting the dots, or what some people call sort of a pyramid principle, right? You find a chronological sequence, that is, you connect the dots, you identify themes, and you weave them very logically together. So those are just a few examples, but it is important before you start to think what kind of structure you're going to use to flow your narrative. Now let's step back now to recommendations. And this is really where you, as a storyteller, sort of stick your neck out. You take a risk, you offer advice, you sort of step back. And as Allyson pointed out earlier in the story, you don't really want to include your recommendations inside the story, because the story so far has been based on real facts, real insights, real data. Here is again what I said is where you stick out your neck, and you want to save them for the end, for they're the resolution to your story, right? You want to think of them in light of your stakeholders' business issues. You want them to see the impact of your story, that your story will have on them, and only then you can recommend to your stakeholders what to do next. And ideally, you push it all the way to saying what the dollar impact is of your recommendations. Okay, so now we have talked about, Allyson has spoken about the content, the insights. We briefly touched upon the structure and the story flow. We talked about recommendations. So we have all of those components, but it's not enough. Now you really need to inspire your reader. You have to bring it to life. And there's a few things you can, for example, learn from some storytelling devices that writers and directors use. For example, the latest version of Jurassic Park is in 3D. It's a new narrative, a new storytelling device to inspire and excite the audience. The latest Oscar had a live blog. The newest Da Vinci Code has an illustrated, actually interactive edition. The latest Pirates of the Caribbean #3 has a cameo with Keith Richards. These are all just a few examples of how you can continue to inspire and excite your audience. And even if you go back to print, what sometimes people still think is out of style and everybody hates PowerPoint and we do need to do something different. Actually, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with print. There are some great tools online that can help you simply create some infographics to really bring stuff to life in print, right? Photo books, little booklets. These are all simple ideas to really inspire and bring the story to life. And then digital. Digital actually opens up a whole new world of opportunities, only limited by your creativity, right? You can think about blogs. You can think about using Instagram to really make a point to your client in an interactive way. There are some really simple and clever tools online that allows you to make videos yourself. Not going to take you a lot of time, but it's a real impactful way to tell a story to your clients. And finally, what I'm personally very passionate about is taking your story to the stage, to the place where the presentation takes place. And we've had examples, and here's an example of a hair care client where we brought in an actor to really make a point on the issues that the client was struggling with. And there's almost nothing more powerful than using actors and bring the story to the stage. And again, these are all examples of really creating a powerful story, right? We talked about the insights, the content, the story flow, the recommendations, and inspiring the client. So to recap, getting to a great research story is a combination of art and science. Starting with a business issue, uncover the insights, develop an inspiring story flow, and finally inspire the client to act. And that finishes our presentation. Thank you very much, and we're open to questions.